I'm going to switch back to Visual Studio, and that overlap right here at 20, this is the amount of space between it. So instead of hard coding the value 20, I'm just going to change that to say this.overlap. So now it's going to check the overlap dependency property and use that value to lay out the elements instead of the hard-coded 20. Now let's switch over to Blend and watch what happens. I'm going to select my overlap stack panel. Everything is on top of each other, but now as I expand the overlap, the elements are relayed out depending on the new value. Now one of the other neat things you can do with the dependency property is you can animate on it. So I'm going to set my overlap to 0. I'm going to create a new timeline just to show this off. I'm going to use the default name, set a keyframe at time 0, and at time 2, set the overlap to 40. Now watch when I play the animation. You'll see that my rectangles animate their expansion between each other. You can see how this might be useful if you're, say, displaying a significant amount of data. Instead of overwhelming your user with all of it at once, you can slowly pan out the information so they can get an idea of just how much is there. Now the overlap is just one of the properties that we're using when we're specifying where all of our elements are. We're also rotating those elements and we're moving those elements down from the top of our window. We can create dependency properties for those just as well. Now let's go ahead and do that real quickly. I'm going to move up to the top and I'm going to take this line for the dependency property. I'm going to copy it and paste it. The first time I pasted it, since it was selected, it pasted over itself. When I press V now, it'll paste it into my text. I'm going to select that line, press Ctrl H to do a change, and I want to replace the text overlap with rotation. Now if I say look in the current document, it'll replace all instances of the string overlap with rotation. That's not what I want. I want to change it to just modify the selection. Now when I press replace all, my overlap property has become my rotation property. Now you notice the fields have been changed, so it's rotation property, rotation, but I made one mistake. I forgot that the word overlap occurs inside my class name, so when it replaced overlap with rotation, it replaced that as well. Well, I'm just going to double click the word overlap stack panel, press Ctrl C to copy it, double click this, and press Ctrl V. That'll fix it for me. Let's scroll over to the right, and there's no other mistakes. So now I've registered the rotation property. I need to do the same thing I did with the overlap to go ahead and expose it. Before I do that, let me add one more dependency property. I'm going to hit Shift down to highlight the line, Ctrl C to copy it, get rid of my selection, press Ctrl V to paste it, select that line, and this time I want to turn the rotation, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and I want to change it to upper offset. It's still looking in the selection, so when I replace all, now that property has been set for me. So now I'm registering all of my dependency properties. I just need to create the fields for them. So I'm going to copy this code, copy it. Let me go down to a new line so I'm not pasting it in a place I don't really expect, and paste it. Ctrl H. I want to replace overlap with rotation in the selection. Now this time, I'm going to use find next to find which changes I want to make. Let me move this out of my way so I can see a little bit better. I want to replace that one, not that one, yes, no, and yes. This time, instead of just doing the replace all, I'm specifically making sure I only replace the properties that I want to change. Let's copy that one more time. Control C, Control V, highlight it, rotation, and replace it with upper offset. This time, rotation is only in the cases where I actually want to replace, so I can safely do a replace all here. Now that all of these properties are set for me, I need to make sure I initialize them down in my constructor. I'm going to roll to the very bottom, and where I set this dot overlap to 0, I need to make sure I set this dot rotation to 0, and this dot upper offset to 0. Now, these values are going to be set, and they'll be initialized when I first run. The last thing I need to do is use them. This is where I use the rotation. And this is where I use the upper offset. I'm going to save, hit Control-Shift-B to build, make sure I did everything correctly, and move back over to Blend. Now my rectangle has been reset, my overlap property is visible, my rotation property is visible, and when I scroll down, my upper offset is visible. Now I can just set these the same way I set any other properties in Blend to go ahead and create exactly the layout I'm looking for.